If you were to go to the DOGE website, they have a counter here of estimated savings and the amount saved per taxpayer. And they have an agency efficiency leaderboard. And the number one on that leaderboard is GSA.
I saw this really interesting map of GSA lease terminations on LinkedIn. And I just liked the post. That's all I did. And then the guy who created the map sends me a message. Fan of the show, saw you speak in MosmoCon, saw you liked my post. If there's anything I can ever do related to GSA stuff, because he's a GSA specialist, which stands for
General Services Administration. It's essentially the government, like the FBI, is coming to rent a floor of an office building that's not in a federally owned building.
So I was like, man, we got an opening this afternoon, and especially with what DOGE is doing right now.
Right.
There'd never be a more interesting time to talk about GSA. If you're listening to this as we publish it, 30% of this conversation is going to be very timely to now. If you're listening to this episode a year from now, that 30% will be more like a history lesson, and we'll see how that stuff plays out. But most of this episode is him just explaining the GSA process. He worked at the GSA for 17 years, and then since he started his own company in 2017, I think he said, he is a landlord rep for GSA. So he works with the owners of the buildings and helping them work with the GSA and create leases that work for everybody. He used the phrase, won the deal but lost their shirt. They didn't really know what they were getting into with the government. It just wasn't nearly as lucrative as they thought.
DOGE is going in and slashing as much as they can with that chainsaw. There's a narrative that's out there. He strips back that narrative to what is actually going on and explaining the reality of it.
He delivered a tremendous amount of context. It's helped me understand what I'm hearing on the news.
Right. That was fascinating.
Without further ado, let's just get into it.
Yeah, let's go.
This episode is sponsored in part by the Massimo Group. Are you a commercial real estate broker looking to boost your business? The Massimo Group is the world's premier coaching organization, transforming the careers of brokers just like you, just like it did for me. Visit www.massimo-group.com today to get started and take your career to the next level. This episode is also brought to you by Site to Do Business, commercial real estate's most advanced toolkit, providing commercial real estate professionals like me with premier data, mapping, and marketing tools to win business and revolutionize decision-making. Visit stdb.com to learn more.
Welcome to Commercially Speaking. I'm Timmy Barron, ADHD.
And I'm Bo Barron, CCI. And what was that?
I don't know. I second guessed what I was doing there for a second. We jumped right in. And I was like, welcome to Commercially Speaking. Excuse me. This is the Commercial Real Estate Podcast where Bo teaches me everything about commercial real estate and commercial real estate investing. I'm an actor, comedian, the co-founder of TISB, which is tennis plus frisbee equals TISB, all disc, no balls. You can check it out, tisb.com. Bo is the owner and director of Barron Commercial Group. He's a CCIM instructor. He's a co-founder of the Hearthstone Fund, among many, many other things that makes him just an incredible big brother and awesome dude, and an incredible teacher. And since episode number 1, I knew nothing about commercial real estate. And now I know so much more because we're almost at episode 100, which I can't wait. Can't wait for that to go out.
Yeah. And look, we mentioned this at the very end of a previous episode. So in case you didn't listen all the way to the end, we have a super special guest for episode 100. We've already recorded it. It was such a captivating conversation. We literally went for 2 hours and 40 minutes.
Yep.
And so we're really, really excited. That's going to happen 5-6 weeks-ish, depending on when this is published. So,
right.
Yeah, man.
Super
almost to 100 episodes.
But today I'm super excited because we just had a video that went out kind of talking about the temperature of what's going on with... I think I asked you about what's going on now that Trump administration is coming in, making all these cuts, and specifically making federal agents or federal workers go back into the office. I saw a few memes about like, oh, commercial real estate brokers are salivating at this, and I asked you about that, and you kind of gave me the accurate look at what's going on. And so I'm very excited to talk about what's happening, but will you fill us in just a little bit about what?
Yeah, so let me set this up.
Yeah.
I'm on LinkedIn this morning,
Okay.
and our buddy Michael Hieronymus shared this map that showed all the GSA lease terminations across the United States. I was like, oh man. So I clicked on it, liked the post, clicked on it, zoomed in. There's one here in Owensboro.
Oh.
They're going to terminate, and we're very familiar with the building. A family member owns the building that's getting the lease terminated, and it's the IRS that's getting the boot. Now that kind of makes me happy.
Yeah.
But I'm checking out this map. I'm like, this is really cool. You know, and GSA stands for
Government
Services.
No, General Service Administrations.
Yep.
Yeah.
So anyway, I get this LinkedIn message from this guy named Chad Becker who created the map.
Yeah.
And he says, hey, I saw that you liked our GSA lease termination map that we created. I was chatting with Michael Hieronymus, and I'm trying to run the next iteration through Site to Do Business. Just need to figure out how the hell to make it work. I saw you at MosmoCon and really enjoy your podcast. Great to have you in my LinkedIn network. If you ever have any questions about anything GSA or federal leasing, please don't hesitate to reach out. To which I thought, oh, we have a cancellation today. I wonder if I could get him on the podcast today.
Bada bang.
So Chad and I did not know each other until today, and he's on the podcast the very same day. So let's welcome Chad Becker to Commercially Speaking.
Yeah.
Thank you for your flexibility and your availability, and that you're willing to come on and share with us your expertise, which is GSA. So Timmy normally asks this question, but since I don't know you that well either, give us the 5-minute origin story. Like, who are you? How'd you get in this business? How on earth did you end up specializing in the GSA stuff? And what is the GSA stuff in the first place?
Yeah, man, it's a strange, narrow niche to find yourself in. So, man, in college, I was a finance major. I had my aspirations of going to Wall Street. I was interning at Morgan Stanley in Atlanta, and the opportunity came up to come work for some federal agency that I never heard of. Quite honestly, when I first heard of General Services Administration, excuse me, I thought it was HUD, because all of their website talked about housing, federal, the federal workforce and federal this, federal that. I just heard housing and I just assumed it was literally housing. Shows you how much I knew about real estate at the time. So I show up at the career fair, give them my resume, get a call, one thing leads to another. And next thing I know, I spend the next 15 years of my life working at the federal government. It took me really to some really awesome opportunities. I loved my time working at GSA, got to move to Charleston, South Carolina for a couple of years where I worked in property management, worked in asset management. So Kentucky, one point Tennessee, those were my territories, my asset management territories. And then at one point, the opportunity came up to actually take a job overseas. So I went and became basically an international leasing person for the U.S. government. So worked for the Department of Navy. I was a civilian employee of the Navy. Wife and I moved to Naples, Italy, and spent 3 years there. Yeah, it was awesome. It took me to some places that I will never want to go back to, in that job, but also took me to some absolutely incredible places. So had a really fortunate career where it was just it was going deep into this niche and kind of looking at it, like I said, from every aspect, whether it was property management and federal buildings to, asset management. So, looking at the whole spectrum of commercial real estate. Also ended up working as an in-house broker, essentially. So a leasing specialist within the General Services Administration. And at one point, I my entire life, I always wanted to be an entrepreneur. I always wanted to own my own business. My parents always owned their own business. My grandparents owned their own business. So it was in my blood. And here I was doing the least entrepreneurial thing possible, working for the federal government. So in 2017, had a long conversation with my wife. I'd already had, probably 3 or 4 failed businesses at this point. and she basically gave me the heads up that, hey, this is your last shot. And so I said, all right, I'm going to go for it, but this time it's different. I'm going to quit my job. And when you burn the boats, it's a little more motivation, right, to
Right.
make things work. So 2017 started doing landlord rep work on GSA leases. We've stayed in our niche, we stayed in our swim lane, and this is what we've been doing for the last, or this is what I've been doing for the last 8 years.
Wow.
Is landlord rep work on GSA and federal government leasing deals. So
All right. Now, just because we're dealing with Timmy here, let's get real simplistic and clear about what you mean when you say landlord work.
Yeah.
yeah, so I mean, I'm just like a landlord rep leasing broker in the market, except my specialty isn't necessarily a product type. It's a tenant. And, this is a tenant that it does require its own specialization. The lease, you don't, the government doesn't sign a landlord lease. Doesn't happen. You're going to sign their lease as a landlord. So you need to know that lease inside and out. The design, let's say you're fortunate enough to win the deal. It's the challenges don't stop there. You have to get through the design and construction process for the tenant improvements. And, when you get this package that's, sometimes 100 pages long, sometimes it's 300 pages long.
Cool.
It could be a little bit of a shock to people who aren't familiar with it. So, I mean, we literally, ideally what we like to do is we like to get in at the very start of the transaction, building out the financials of the deal and get the landlord to lease execution. And then, ideally we like to stay on all the way through what we call in our world post-award, but really it's the design and construction phase of getting the tenant physically into the building, getting the space built out.
Gotcha. So if I could say this back to you in a very, very simple way, you are representing the owner of a building who is going to have the government come move in, and you're the one who helps them understand the lease terms and getting them in there.
Yeah. I mean, maybe I should even, take a little step further back. I mean, when people think of the federal government or real estate, they probably generally think of, the federal courthouse that's, in their town, the federal building that's, that these are the things that they're familiar with. The government really can't own all the real estate that they occupy.
Yeah.
To give you just some basic statistics on the lease portfolio, I mean, we're talking about 7,505 leases around the country. We're talking about 173 million square feet, to essentially one tenant, the U.S. government through the General Services Administration. But that represents several tenants who are different tenants who are actually occupying the space. It's $5.8 billion in annual rent spend. So, this isn't a small tenant. So we talk about this being a very niche market, and it absolutely is. But it's a niche market where there's a lot of square footage, there's a lot of leases, and there's a lot of money being spent in this space.
Right.
What would you, who are like the top 3 or 4 agencies of the federal government that lease the most amount of space?
Oh man, any of my competition is watching this is going to love this because I don't have a great answer for you. But I mean, and there's different ways of looking at it, right? There's different metrics.
Sure.
So if you're looking at, number of leases, you're probably looking at Social Security Administration. I mean, yeah, I think they have something like 2,000 plus leases around the country. These are they range from the field offices to, specialized use offices. There's things like, hearing offices where people go and they'll, either video conference with a administrative judge with the SSA, or they'll meet with a judge in person. So there's a lot of functionality like that. Department of Homeland Security, another big tenant. You know, I'm sure there's other large tenants in this space, but the top three are not coming to me right now. But I mean, really, it's that entire spectrum. It's everything from, you know, the gun toters, right? You know, you got your ATFs, your DEA, your FBI. So you have your law enforcement agencies, but then you also have the people who are, you know, servicing the public. Social Security Administration, you have IRS, taxpayer assistance centers, things like that are a little more the friendly side that reaches out and touches the public. So it's a big spectrum. And then obviously Forest Service, you know, Park Service, all that good stuff.
This is fascinating.
This just made me think of there was a building, I think it was in Paducah, Kentucky. There was a developer who built an office building, had one tenant in his pocket. It was a law firm, and then got a GSA lease with the FBI on the second floor.
Oh, wow.
So you had a criminal defense firm on the first floor, or maybe they were on the second. I forget who's on what floor. It did not work out. Those are not good co-tenants. If you're being charged with a crime and you have to walk past the FBI office to get you to your attorney's office,
right?
Not a great tenant mix there.
No, yeah, it's you know, it's an interesting space that, I mean, people really don't think a lot about, and it doesn't get a lot of attention until we see what we see right now in the market, where, you know, GSA it seems to be imploding. I'm here to partially say it. The narrative isn't necessarily as bad as kind of what you're seeing in the news, but
before we get into that,
we'll get there.
let me just ask you another question or two, just foundationally about GSA. They have unique leases, and you were just sharing with us that if you're going to lease to the GSA, to some federal agency, you're going to use their lease. What are some unique things about their lease?
You know, we usually describe GSA leases as part real estate instrument and part insurance policy. You know, when you think about a GSA lease, I mean, really what you're talking about is it's almost a complete transference of risk from the tenant to the landlord. So the tenant is taking on very little risk, you know, in the, you know, with the terms of during their occupancy, fluctuations to their rent payments. You know, you're going to find things like CPI adjustments for operating rent. You'll get real estate tax pass-throughs in general. Make sure you read your lease to make sure these things are actually in there. But generally they are. I mean, that's, if you're working with GSA, generally you are going to get some hedge against inflation. Also, if you're putting the lease together properly, you know, you're also getting some step ups in rent along the way, but it's not guaranteed, and you have to know really how to structure them, because you're not going to go into a GSA lease and say, hey, you know, it's, you know, starting rate of X and we're going to increase the rent by, you know, 3% a year. You're not going to get that kind of deal. So it's really knowing how to structure the deals to adequately protect ownership from the variability of cost. That's one thing. So, you know, they're full service plus or gross plus leases. You know, we hear things like full service in the market or gross leases in the market. These aren't the same thing. I mean, the requirements to perform in these leases are even that much more higher in a GSA lease. There's strange, you know, cost drivers, like cyclical carpeted paint. I mean, the government's going to say, hey, you know, every X years, I want you to come in and completely replace my carpet and paint. Even if the agency sitting in the space doesn't want it, we're going to argue about it later as to whether or not you have to do it. And that's one of the joys of operating in this environment, is frequently you have, you know, GSA, one side of the government saying you absolutely have to do this, and it's in the contract. And let's say you have FBI as a tenant saying, I don't want people coming into my space. So no, they're not coming in to do this work. You know, to me, that I think the most interesting thing, and it's so commonly overlooked about the GSA lease. I mean, people hear GSA leases, they think federal government, they say, look, zero risk, right? I mean, I'm going to get my rent. You know, agency was established in 1949. Basically, haven't missed a rent payment since 1949. I mean, I don't know how many other tenants can say that or carry that level of credit worthiness. The risk isn't on the revenue side. It really is on the expense side. And it's because once you offer that operating rent, I mean, you're going to get some CPI adjustments along the way, but that's really it. You're locked in, and that's why it's so critical to get these things right from the beginning. Otherwise, it's going to be a long-term headache.
I've heard about termination clauses in the GSA leases. Are they in every GSA lease? Does that mean, look, we're in an environment right now where, you know, if you're breathing and you ever watch the news, you know, Elon and DOGE are out there making the world or the United States a much more efficient place. And they've just terminated or are in the process of terminating all these leases, which means they can. So does every GSA lease have a termination clause?
So I would say the vast majority do. Every now and then you will get a lease that's, let's say it's 15 years firm, 20 years firm. You will find those. They're not the standard though. Generally, I mean, going back, you know, let's say several years, the GSA standard used to be 5 years or a 10-year lease, 5 years firm. So it's really the distinction between firm term and soft term that's key here. Mm-hmm. It's the soft term where those termination rights kick in. And you're, you know, depending on the size of the lease, the complexity of the build out, you know, maybe the market where it's located, you're generally looking at a 90 to 180 day notice provision. So, you know, once you cross into that soft term period, I mean, it really is, you know, you're in a, you know, if it's a 90-day termination notice, you're in a 90-day rolling lease for 5 years, let's say. So yeah, I mean, the lease termination clause in a GSA lease, it's a real thing. It exists. I mean, that's really what you see DOGE going after right now is the leases that are in soft term. And yeah, there's a reason for it. So
Timmy, does that make sense to you?
A little bit. I could use some clarification.
Okay, so let's say you have a 10-year lease, 5 years firm. Mm-hmm. After your first 5 years, there's a termination clause that the federal government, as the tenant, can say, we have the right to terminate this lease. At any time, we have to give you a certain amount of days notice. So if it's a 90-day notice, that's that rolling 90 days. Like at any point, they could come to you and say, 90 days, we're out of here. Or maybe it's 180 days or whatever it was negotiated as. And so when you see the federal government do what they're doing now and they're starting to terminate a bunch of leases, this is the clause in the lease that allows them to do that.
So when you become soft after being firm, you've got about 90 days to pull out? Is that?
I so step into that one.
At the government's will.
At the government's will. Okay. Yeah. Sure.
Chad, sorry about that.
Thanks for that layup, Bo. Mm-hmm. Thanks for the layup.
All right. So 2 other quick questions, and then I'd love to hear your take on what is actually going on right now. First thing is, do you have any great stories of some creative landlords that structured some unique or really interesting deals with the GSA?
Yeah.
And if this gets into like the secret sauce of your business, Timmy can just edit this out, but.
Not a ton. I mean, quite honestly, I mean, you know, I think the beauty of structuring these deals, yeah, some of it's in the, you know, the lease structure itself, but, you know, a lot of it's in the creative financing that has on the, happens on the ownership side. You know, when it comes to GSA leasing, I mean, yeah, there is a little bit of, you know, secret sauce to how to structure these deals. I mean, you know, one of the things to know that ultimately the government typically does what's called, and this is probably going to get a little boring, but the government does what's called GSA does what's called a lowest price technically acceptable lease. And really what that means is if you meet the minimum requirements that we're looking for, if the building meets the minimum requirements, if you fill out the forms and you dot the I's and you cross the T's and you get the initials in the right box, that's also part of your technical acceptability. And then after that, it really just comes down to lowest price based on a present value analysis. So, you can play around with a little CCIM 101, a little, finance, and, try to figure out how to structure the deal so that the landlord's getting what they need, but ultimately you're ending up with, you can shave a couple of cents off the present value analysis. So, I mean, that's kind of the extent of the creativity. This isn't really a world of creative deal structuring. I would say it's a little more cut and dry than you may hope.
And that's the government.
Yeah.
Well, let me share with Timmy what it's like to actually try to win the award of one of these leases.
Yeah. Okay.
This is what happens, and I'm going to say this at a real high level. So if I get any of this wrong, Chad, I've only done this a couple of times. What'll happen is let's say I've got a listing, so I'm representing the landlord, and then we'll see in the paper, or it'll be posted, a request for proposal. Essentially, it's RFP situation. They give you the requirements, and you have to submit your proposal, sealed bid kind of thing. And so you'll go online, you fill out all this paperwork. It's extensive. And a lot of times, like, my eyes would be crossing, like, I don't even know what that question means, Yeah. And then I'm working with a mom and pop who's got a building downtown that's an office building, and they lack the sophistication to really understand this whole process.
Yeah.
And if we win the award, now we got a whole other problem because there's all that post-award stuff he was talking about that we've never had to deal with before.
Yeah.
But it's a lot of work to basically be the lowest price technically acceptable building gets the win. So like, it's not about being nice. It's not about it's like, if it checks the box, which one's the lowest price, we're going that route.
Yeah.
These are taxpayer dollars. And a lot of me can appreciate that, but it's an ordeal. It's a lot of work just to propose. It's a sealed bid thing, so you don't even know who's opening it. There's no relationship there.
Yeah.
Like, from my perspective, like, I don't even know who I'm talking to.
Right.
As far as the tenant's concerned. And then we just find out one day that we win it, or we don't hear anything.
Right. Oh, yeah.
Is that basically right?
Yeah. I mean, in general, they've gotten away from the sealed bids. So it is more of a collaborative, if you can call it that. You'll send in your offer, and then, a couple weeks later, you'll get a letter saying, hey, dummy, here's all the things you missed. And then you go back and you correct the things you missed, and then you send that in, and you get another letter a couple weeks later. So, I mean, it's an iterative process. And, we're in general, there's different, GSA lease procurement methods that they can use, but the general process is it's a little more collaborative. You might have a phone call where they'll tell you to sharpen your pencil, or some creative way to say, hey, get your rates down a little bit.
Yeah.
But what you don't find a lot of, and this is the part that drives a lot of people crazy, is you don't get into a lot of true negotiation. You get into what the government calls negotiations, but what they really mean is, we're just going to point out the things that we don't like or we think you're missing, and we're just going to tell you to go fix that. That's what the government calls negotiations. It's not, hey, look, if you can get down to, $24.50 a foot, then we got a deal. They can't do that. So they call that bargaining. Real world calls it negotiations. The government can't really do that. It has to be this kind of arm's length, treat everyone the same. Everyone has the same information. And I mean, from the government perspective, you kind of get that, right? It helps to get away from favoritism. It helps to get away from, oh, I like this developer, I like this owner. So from a taxpayer perspective, it's the process which hopefully results in the best deal for the government, therefore the best deal for the taxpayer. It doesn't always work out that way, because honestly, if you're dealing with someone who doesn't know what they're really getting into, they don't know what they're signing up for. We call them, the people who they win the deal, but they lose their shirt. And that's the part of the business. I mean, quite honestly, that's part of the business that really brought me into the landlord rep side. Is being on the government side, just seeing that happen too many times where, people would, you got the lease, but you didn't understand what you were signing up for. And it's, at best, you're going to have very little NOI. At worst, you're going to have to get rid of the building to avoid losing it. So,
I admire that a lot. You're seeing behind the curtain there and then jumping to the other side, as it were, to really help to protect others from losing their shirt.
Here's the other dynamic about all of this that's very, very strange and somewhat unique. There's some other tenants that kind of operate this way, like national tenants, but the local office, let's say the FBI office wants to move.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know that that's the case here. They rent from our uncle, so they should stay. But
yeah,
let's say the local guys come and they look at one of our listings and they're like, "Oh, this would be great. We love it." They're like, "Be sure you bid," and it doesn't matter at all that they love it. I'm not dealing with them. You know, so you start to feel good all of a sudden, like, "Oh man, might be able to get the FBI in here or something."
Yeah,
whatever agency you're dealing with, somebody that maybe, as Chad was saying, you have a phone call with, and maybe it's a little bit collaborative, but like there's no relationship with that person. Now, when Chad represents folks, he probably has relationships with these. Probably a lot of his value is that he does know the process and he does have relationships with those folks. But for the normal broker, man, it doesn't matter that the local office loves it.
Yeah, right. Yeah, no, I see that. I see that. But my question, hearing everything so far, is it seems like as a landlord, you've got a government agency that's potentially, can come in. The biggest pro in your head is, I don't have to worry about rent not coming in, right? Because they always pay. So it's like, oh yeah, but you mentioned, Chad, that you want to make sure that that it's so important at the very beginning of the process that you get that rent correct to benefit the landlord. But everything else sounds like a con. Like everything else sounds like, okay, well, I'm taking all the risk as the landlord. There's no negotiation, as it were, as you're going through. So what is it? Especially from your perspective, what is a landlord, what can they be happy or excited about to consider doing this?
I mean, ultimately what it comes down to is if you get the right pricing structure in place, if you get the right financials in the deal, they're good leases. I mean, you kind of know what to expect. We were talking about the termination rights, earlier, and, there was some analysis that was done on this, several years ago now, but I mean, ultimately what it turned out was, even in the soft term, so you may have 5 years of soft term, the chances of the government actually terminating during that period, now things have changed now, but, prior to January, it was like a 1 to 2% termination risk during.
I was going to ask you what that number was.
So I mean, it was pretty. If they signed a 10-year deal and if it was 5 years firm, they were going to be there for 10 years. Yeah. Now some agencies are definitely more sticky than others. If they, some agencies come in and spend a ton of money on tenant improvements, those agencies are very likely going to be there the full 10 years, plus an additional 10 years or 15 years or 20 years. So, I mean, we were really seeing, prior to the pandemic, we were seeing GSA really moving toward longer firm terms. That was part of that was feedback from the market. I mean, the market had been basically screaming at GSA for years, like, we can give you better deals. You just have to extend the firm term and decrease the amount of soft term that you're asking for. That's going to reduce our financing. That's going to reduce our risk, and we can pass some of those savings on. So, we were really starting to see things get a little bit better, but obviously that changed during the pandemic, and we're seeing a lot more return to, a lot of 5 and 5. So 10 years, 5 years firm. Unfortunately, there's been kind of a return to that, but there's still a number of, long-term leases that are being advertised and available in the market. So it's still a good place to be. It's going through some turbulence, but ultimately, good leases, you just have to price them right from the beginning.
Gotcha.
Otherwise, you're stuck with it, and you're not going to get a lot of sympathy when you go to the government and say, "Hey, sorry guys, we screwed up on our initial offer or on our final offer." You're not going to get a lot of sympathy.
Do you remember who it was we had on that? One of their tenants was, I think, the state prison.
Oh, that was Mark Seipert.
Yeah,
the state of California.
Yeah, and they ended up not being able to pay rent for a long. Like that ended up being a really bad deal for
They
him.
couldn't pass a budget for a period of months, and so they just stopped paying.
Right, but that was the state.
That was the state of California.
Yeah, gotcha.
Yeah, not the
not the federal.
Sure.
Yeah, okay.
So just super quick on that. I mean, one of the things that makes GSA leases really more attractive than other federal agencies that have their own leasing authority is GSA has this thing called the Federal Buildings Fund. So it's kind of a revolving fund, money in, money out. GSA or the occupying agencies are constantly feeding into this fund, and GSA is paying rent out of the fund, and it goes toward capital improvements for the federal buildings and other things like that. But generally it kind of operates to the extent possible, like a private sector company, to the extent that they can. So that's really what allows GSA to execute long-term leases that have true firm terms that aren't what they call subject to appropriations. Kind of the California prison you were talking about, or, some of the other federal agencies, you'll find this language that says subject to appropriations, basically like, hey, yeah, we guarantee we'll be here for 5-10 years, whatever the firm term on the lease is. And that sounds super attractive. But then when you're scrolling through the lease, you'll see the subject to appropriations that basically says, yeah, we guarantee we'll be here as long as Congress gives us money. Otherwise, this is our termination for convenience, which you really don't find in commercial real estate.
So you want to see this map?
Yes, I do.
I'm gonna show them. Can I show them the map? You put it on LinkedIn. Man. Okay.
Yeah, we posted it far and wide to try to help people.
So what we got here is the map of all the GSA terminated leases. Is that
the ones that have received notices to terminate? Yeah.
Okay. All right.
It's not sexy, but
neither are the firm term negotiations I have with my wife.
Look, can you see that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a bunch of leases. So if somebody wants to find this, Chad, where should they go? Should they look you up on LinkedIn?
Yeah, I mean, if it's funny as we were kind of preparing for this conversation, because I know you always ask the question, where can people find you and find these resources? And I didn't have time to build a new webpage or have my guy build a new webpage. But yeah, I mean, I would say going finding me on LinkedIn. We're constantly posting this stuff. We're constantly updating this map whenever DOGE changes the information on their website.
Yeah.
And then whenever we update it, we always do a new post about it. So yeah, this is LinkedIn's probably the best spot.
Well, here's what I think is cool. So if you can zoom in on this, click on the icon there, and it'll tell you this is the Internal Revenue Service National Office in Owensboro. There's the address. 61% occupied by the government. Total contract value, savings.
Wow.
I mean, it gives you, address, square footage, all that stuff.
And the DOGE comment?
Mm-hmm. Termination,
termination
mass modification.
Mass mod.
Yeah.
So that's, that's pretty slick. And I mean, this is literally the map that made me want to have you on. So give us what's going on. Like, give us the context around this map, because you can look at that and think the sky's falling.
Right.
I don't necessarily think the sky's falling, but what is happening, based on what I'm seeing, is you've got some people in the new administration, and the new administration itself are trying to make things more efficient.
Mm-hmm.
And so they seem to, regardless of how you feel about this, but they seem to believe that the federal government is bloated as far as workers. So it looks like they're trying to really streamline, which means less workers. You need less office space. Mm-hmm. And so they're going through and they're trying to right size government and make it smaller, more efficient, more effective, which, again, regardless of how you feel about it, that should lower taxes. I mean, that should help.
Sure. Taxes.
The taxpayer.
Inflation. Yeah. Right.
So, with that amount of context, like, Chad, what don't we know?
And before we jump into it, kind of tell us from your end, like what is the narrative that we are seeing, and how is it different? And there's one more thing I was going to ask. It'll come back. But yeah, tell us about that narrative and how this is the reality.
Yeah, I mean, so I guess this is where I'll get my disclaimer. Like, nothing I'm about to say is politically motivated. I'm not trying to spin anything one way or another. Everything we're doing is trying to present information as factually as possible, so that landlords in this space know what they're dealing with, and we're just trying to share information. Yeah. So, with that disclaimer aside, I guess I don't want to get angry emails. So I mean, here's the reality. So right now on the DOGE website, and I haven't checked it in the last 30 minutes, so it may be different. But at the time of this recording, let's say there's 748 leases that they have listed on their website. Some of them, arguably, you could say are not the work of DOGE. They were things that GSA had been working on for years and years. We can get into specifics on that as to why I know that to be true, but we're also crowdsourcing comments from people or feedback from the industry to say, hey, if you know anything about this particular lease, can you help us understand the story of really what's going on with this particular lease? So 748 leases currently on the DOGE website. All right, so that equates to 9.6 million square feet of leases that, they're saying, hey, it's on the chopping block. We're getting rid of it. So if you remember, for context, I said there was about 173 million square feet in the GSA inventory. So they're currently listing 9.6 million square feet in reductions. So what that equates to in a rent spend is about $260 million in annual rent spend, compared to the $5.8 billion that's currently in the annual rent spend. So they're making effort, right, to bring down these numbers. What I will tell you is the rentable square footage and the annual rent spend, especially the rentable square footage, has been falling for over a decade. So when we're talking about reducing the square footage in the leased inventory, this is really nothing new. GSA and the federal government have been doing this for well over a decade. It goes back probably before the Obama administration, but during the Obama administration, we had this thing called freeze the footprint, where it's like, all right, stop growing the real estate footprint. And then they moved to what they called the next phase of it, which is reduce the footprint. And it's like, okay, we need to start bringing down the square footage, that the federal government occupies. So we've seen past administrations try to tackle this question of, does the government have too much real estate? And they've been, like I said, working on it for over a decade now.
As a commercial real estate broker, your success depends on the right strategies and guidance. The Massimo Group, the world's top coaching organization for brokers, can help you scale your business and increase your income. And as a former client, I've personally experienced how their coaching can transform not only your career, but also your life. Don't wait to grow. Head to www.massimo-group.com today and see how their proven systems can work for you. This episode is also brought to you by Site to Do Business, the ultimate commercial real estate data analysis and mapping tool. Whether you're a seasoned professional or just starting out, Site to Do Business provides the data and insights you need to make informed decisions and close deals faster. Frankly, it's the tool that I use the most in my business. Access comprehensive market analysis, demographic data, and powerful mapping tools like ArcGIS, Placer AI, and Flood Maps all in one place. Identify the best locations for your clients, analyze market trends, and present your findings with confidence. Don't miss out on this game-changing platform. Visit stdb.com today and see how it can optimize your business. And now back to the show.
What we're seeing on the DOGE website is essentially what is already in process for some of these things. So they are indeed true. Like, the agency is moving out. They are moving to a federal building. They've decided to close an office. A lot of those decisions have already happened. Really, what we want to focus on are the ones that have the note next to them that said mass mod. It's just kind of I guess a quick and dirty way of saying we have sent out notices, regardless of really an agency need, an agency request. We GSA have just sent out a notice saying we're gonna terminate these leases. We've been hearing in the news lately, especially over the last couple of days, this concept of scalpel versus the hatchet. Mm-hmm. What we're seeing here is really the hatchet approach. GSA did some outreach with their tenant agencies and said, hey, we're going to be reducing your square footage unless you can justify to us why you need it. There was mixed feedback, and, but GSA went ahead largely and moved forward with terminating a bunch of leases. Now you get into the propaganda piece of it, maybe a little bit, or propaganda is the right word, but the
narrative,
political narrative piece of it, where they call it, whenever you hear DOGE refer to these lease terminations, they'll always refer to it as vacant and underutilized space, vacant or underutilized. The reality is a lot of these spaces are neither vacant nor are they underutilized. If they were vacant, then GSA was already working to terminate them. If they were underutilized, well, now we have another dynamic coming into play here, where we have the federal employees being told, hey, you got to return to office. So even if something is underutilized today, doesn't mean it's going to be underutilized in a week when the return to office, in the next months, as this return to office continues to roll into effect.
Is that
so?
Sorry to interrupt you, but is the return to office? What is the timeline for that? Does anybody know?
It varies by agency, from my understanding. Okay. Like, even GSA has 3 different phases depending on the classification of employee you are. So it's every agency has their own approach. What I think what we are hearing and seeing anecdotally is a lot of folks, they're just not even waiting for their phase. I mean, we're hearing about traffic counts, picking up in DC, which not super exciting to those who've been enjoying a somewhat lighter commute for the last several years. I think I heard that the ridership on the metro was up to peak levels, pre-pandemic.
Wow.
So, in DC, we're seeing that play out, but also we have conversations with the owners who own buildings, obviously outside of DC. As you saw from the map, I mean, the GSA lease footprint, it's all over the country.
It's where the people are.
It's where the people are. It's everywhere. So, I mean, we're hearing, numbers are up, from on-site property management. They're like, we haven't seen the building this busy in years, So return to office it's already in effect. People are already doing it. I mean, it's just, to some extent. So that's where I get in. I guess my criticism of this would be the order of operations don't make a lot of sense to me. We're seeing like kind of three things happening at the same time. We're seeing this mandate to return to office. Okay, great. Get people back in the office. That makes it anyone who owns an office building really happy to hear.
Yes.
So return to office, we have that happening. We also have these, what the government calls RIFs, reduction in force. Everyone else calls them layoffs. We see these rolling out. I mean, the numbers are, can be rather astounding. I mean, 70,000, 80,000 from the Veterans Administration laid off. It was thousands from USDA. So it's hard to find like a good, accurate accounting of this, but I mean, it's a significant number of employees are being laid off within the federal government, and they're not done yet. So at the same time, you have GSA out here just terminating leases. So we're saying, hey, come back to the office, those of you who still have a job, and we might be getting rid of the office that you would be coming back to. So there's this strange order of operations that's playing out. It feels like it could be done differently. I would certainly advocate, for probably holding on to the space until we know what the personnel headcount's going to be. But that's not the chosen path of those leading GSA right now.
So maybe you could say that they could do it in a way that's a little bit more efficient.
It seems like you would have the right team planning this stuff out, based on the name. But yeah. I mean, we're seeing a lot of inefficient approaches to achieving efficiency.
Have you seen the DOGE website?
There's the title right there, the episode title. What?
Have you seen the DOGE website?
No.
So big, bold print at the top. And this is what I think explains this inefficient order of operations. Estimated savings, $105 billion. Amount saved per taxpayer, $652.17. It appears to me that what they're trying to do is deliver on their campaign promises and show we are cutting the fat.
Yeah.
And here's the numbers to back it up, and we're going to figure out on the back end how to make it work.
Yeah.
And part of me likes the perceived difference, because what I'm used to hearing and noticing is campaign promises backed up by very little change, and if there is any change, it's slow coming.
Right.
And what we have this time is massive action. It's almost like they're saying, we are going to change so much so fast.
Yeah.
And we'll figure out how to make it work.
Yeah, it's like asking for forgiveness, not permission.
And I kind of like the difference.
Yeah.
Now, I don't love necessarily how this is playing out for office space in the United States based on termination of all these GSA leases and how it can really impact markets and stuff. But like, I like all the action, man.
I do too. But with this, it seems like that, especially when it comes to commercial real estate and GSA, that right now there's a lot of uncertainty.
Yeah, and there certainly will be unintended consequences.
Sure. Yeah. Yep. What do you think, Chad?
Yeah, I mean, we're so exactly to that point, so we're talking about the 748 that are out there right now. Anecdotally, we don't have the numbers to back this up yet because DOGE isn't necessarily reporting on it yet. I'm sure they will come through and correct the website, but it sounds like pretty substantial portions of those lease termination notices are being rescinded. A lot of when you go down the list, you'll see a lot of Social Security Administration. Well, that was one thing that they said, we're going to do everything we can to not touch public facing entities, public facing agencies. Well, then you see all these SSAs. And then there was also a bunch of IRS taxpayer assistance centers. Kind of feels like the wrong time of year to maybe be shutting down taxpayer assistance centers.
Yeah.
And also, the thing people don't really think about is SSA offices it's not just the public that cares about those. People in Congress really love their SSA office. They love that it's in their district. They want that's a big voting block, consistent, reliable voting block, and you don't want to piss those people off. So if you're in Congress, you don't want to see your SSA office closed. A lot of those are being rescinded, and they're also being rescinded just because largely a lot of them were done in error. Really, they were trying to get rid of, in a lot of these cases, they were trying to get rid of maybe a 10, 15%, use of that space. And they were terminating the entire lease in effect to reduce about 10 to 15% of the square footage for this function called OHO. It's the hearings office. So that was really done in error. The taxpayer assistance centers, a lot of those were done in error because, GSA internally had them classified, using the wrong classification code within their systems. So that was done in error. And then we're seeing extreme examples of, like the early, it was like the tornado early warning center for the National Weather Service in Oklahoma. I know you guys are real estate people, not weather people, but I don't know if you know this. Oklahoma has a lot of tornadoes.
Yeah. I have heard that.
Not sure if you're aware of that or not, but I mean, essentially, you were looking at shutting down that office that served a very specialized function,
Right.
And it sounds like that's one of the ones that's likely to be rescinded, and arguably for good reason.
Yeah. And it seems like those errors, like with what you just said, some of it is not fully an error because of the decision by DOGE, but some of them are an error because of the government not classifying it correctly.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, ultimately that's, you could consider it a database error,
Yeah.
But I think the bigger concern that we see is again, with the hatchet approach, right? You're coming in, to Bo's point, they wanted to achieve quick results, quick action. Well, when you move quick, you're going to break things, right?
Yeah.
The question is, and I think this is the thing that Congress is really starting to pick up on, and they're starting to question themselves is, that's something that may work in business, move fast, break it, figure out what needs to be put back together, and then fix it. Is that the approach that you take with the government? Is that a viable approach with the U.S. government? Yeah. I'm not here to cast judgment on that, but we are definitely seeing that mistakes were made, things got broke, they're putting it back together, and Congress is starting to, kind of come to life on this topic and say, hey, maybe we need a little more say in this. And also, I think we're hearing that the president is directing his cabinet to have a little more say in, the mass layoffs that are happening and how that's going to affect square footage. So there's some change that's happening. It appears that, they might be starting to pump the brakes a little bit. I don't think anyone's expecting the direction to change. I think we're just looking at the speed of the change to maybe slow down a little bit.
Yeah, and no one's yelling, now I'm chopping off Phyllis's head with a chainsaw. Ring, 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 ring.
Office?
Yeah, the office.
Yeah. And I bet that all this massive action that they've done thus far really will earn them the runway to pump the brakes on it a little bit and get it right. But I would love to see the case study on the impacts of these decisions 2-3 years from now.
Well, sure. Yeah.
That'd be really interesting. Chad, I know this is changing every 30 minutes and you don't have a crystal ball, but you do have, what'd you say, 17 years of experience?
23.
Well, I mean, actually working with the GSA, like in the GSA, you were there 23 years?
Yeah, inside and outside. Yeah, total experience here.
Wow.
So what markets do you think will get hit the hardest as far as a vast amount of square footage flooding the market as available supply. I would have to think DC would be number one on that list. But what other markets, if I'm right about that, what other markets might have a cause for concern here?
There are certain markets that have heavier federal presences than others. DC's the obvious one. Atlanta is going to see some disruption. Kansas City is another market that has a decent size exposure to federal leasing. Here where we are, Denver, there's a lot of federal leases, a lot of federally owned footprint, and that's something maybe we can talk about, as well if we have the time. The story isn't really just about leasing. There's some substantial changes that are also happening in the owned footprint as well, and that may present itself, more as opportunity for developers or people who are in the adaptive reuse game. That may present some opportunity, and I think that's definitely going to be a place to watch.
Well, let's go there.
Yeah, let's go there.
Unpack that a little bit.
Yeah. So
this whole time I'm thinking leases. 100%. I'm thinking leases.
Yeah.
So,
well, that's what the story's been largely about thus far. I mean, that's what we're seeing. That's what we're seeing on the DOGE website.
mhm.
There's big square footage numbers in the lease market. So in the federally owned footprint, there's kind of two things going on. Number one, you have this, and I won't get into the details of the legislation because you want your listeners to be awake, right?
Yep.
But basically, there was this legislation passed in 2016 called FASTA. Don't worry about that. But it created this thing called the Public Buildings Reform Board. This is your scalpel team, right? They've been looking at the federal inventory for years now. You have a highly sophisticated board, really going through the entire federal inventory, looking for high impact real estate to divest of. Like I said, incredibly well-known, intelligent people, well-known investors, people who are well-known in the government space. They have done fantastic work. So you have this group, which has a report coming out. I can't remember. It's later this year. And this is going to be one of their final reports out to Congress to say, hey, these are the roughly 40 buildings that we think are really high value buildings that the government is just sitting in them. And if we release them to the private market, they're going to present really amazing opportunities for that community. Wow. To, whether that's a scrape and rebuild, or if that's, reusing the property for some other purpose. I mean, it's up to the market to figure out what that highest and best use is. But that's going to be a really exciting thing to see. So we're going to see that report coming out from the Federal Buildings Reform Board. Like I said, I think it's in the next several months. So the other thing we're seeing is GSA had a press release. This was last week at some point. This shows you how quickly things change. Last week, I want to say it was like Tuesday, they said, hey, here's 443 assets that we GSA have identified for disposal. So we're going to be getting rid of these federally owned assets. Some of these were, buildings. Some of them were actually quite nice buildings. Some of them were buildings of historic significance. So it was kind of it was an interesting list, to say the least. And there's others who've done a deeper dive on that list to kind of, share some of the odd things that were in it. There was also land parcels that, the government never developed, but was still holding on to. Mm-hmm. So, but that was 443 assets. Wow. That the government said, or GSA said, hey, we're getting rid of these. This was, again, the hatchet approach. This is the hatchet approach that we're seeing from the GSA administration. And literally the next day, I think it went up, sometime after afternoon on, let's say, Tuesday. And by Wednesday, it was gone. And
Gone as in went to zero?
But there's a coming soon, basically. And the list was gone. So, people, it got a lot of attention, got a lot of coverage. I mean, it was in, a lot of very large national, publications. And everyone's just wondering, first of all, people were commenting on the list that was there originally. And then people were commenting on how quickly it went away. Now, the word on the street is it is coming back, whether it's going to be the original 443 assets. I don't know. Time will tell whenever it comes back to life. But yeah, I mean, so anyone who's interested in this, you can Google GSA non-core property list. So GSA non-core property list. That's that's what's going to help you find this list when it comes back to life. But what we're seeing is, GSA saying 443, assets with the hatchet approach. And then we have the Public Buildings Reform Board saying somewhere in the ballpark of 40, again, hatchet versus scalpel. But the one thing that's, I think, really clear is, and this GSA leadership team has made it very clear, they're not only looking to reduce the lease footprint, they're also looking to reduce the federally owned footprint.
Would they lease it back?
So what was that?
Would they lease it back?
So there's different strategies that are being discussed. So much of this is speculation because it's not really being, they're not being very open about, the plans or how they're looking to go about it. They are looking to make changes. I'm not going to bore you guys with the details, but they are looking to make changes to some of the rules that would give them more flexibility on how to treat the federal real estate. It would open up doors like, sale leaseback. They're looking at maybe things like ground leases. They're also looking at just full on disposal. So, the challenge is that, under the FASTA, so the Public Buildings Reform Board, it allows GSA to kind of fast track the disposal process. If a GSA goes through the traditional disposal process, it's a lengthy process. So, if anyone from DOGE is listening, and we'll know that they're listening if my website gets hacked. But if anyone from DOGE is paying attention, really the efficiency to be garnered here is first reducing the red tape and the burdensome process of the federal government getting rid of their federal buildings. GSA has been trying to do this for years and years and years. And, the GAO and Congress has been yelling at GSA saying, why do you have so many federal buildings? And GSA keeps telling them, we're trying to get rid of them. We don't have enough money to get rid of them. You have to pay to move the people out. You have to restack the existing space that we're moving them to. You can't just close a building for free and then move people for free. So it's been this really constant battle between, GSA and Congress. And, but even if a building is cleared for disposal, there's still all these, regulatory, but also legislative, barriers to moving forward with it. So again, DOGE, if you're looking for something to make more efficient, the disposal process is ripe for opportunity.
Nice. I'm clipping that right now and tagging Elon on X.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. When I go missing. Yeah.
Oh, please don't. No.
Well, Chad, I really enjoyed our very short relationship. Yep.
Yeah, this has been great. It's been great to know you this hour.
That's right.
Speaking of unintended consequences, I would feel terrible if Chad disappeared.
Yeah, same.
I would too. I'd be right there with you.
I bet. Wow. Well, man, what have we not asked you
that people need to know?
That the market needs to know.
Yeah, if
be a bloodbath,
we're watching. I guess that's the best I can say is we have this analytics platform on our website. So if you go to resolutions.com. It looks like Arco Resolutions. Luckily, I'm better at government real estate than choosing domain names. If you would we'll just call it that, arcoresolutions.com. There's a tab at the top that says analytics. It's not the most, user-friendly put together thing. It's powered by Power BI. But you can kind of track the analytics there and see what's happening in the federal leased footprint. One of the things that we're going to be looking is, all of these notices that have gone out, they have termination notice periods tied to them per the lease. So again, I think I mentioned this earlier, but they're anywhere from 90 to 180 days notice, depending on the size of the lease, the market, other variables, just depending on what was negotiated. So this isn't something that we're going to see hit the inventory, the GSA inventory next month. This is something we'll probably start seeing, I'm going to say May, and then go on for a couple of months. So what we're going to be looking for is, one of the things, we have a graph that shows rentable square footage, and you can see it's kind of like this somewhat steady decline over the last 10 years, which is how far our graph goes back. And, it accelerated, definitely during COVID. We saw some more rentable square footage come off the inventory. The question is going to be, once we get into the next couple of months, and, are we going to see that steady trend continue? In which case, I don't know really what came from this effort other than a lot of, chaos. I do expect what we're going to see is, some minor drop off, some minor cliffs. I think you will see some drastic movement on the rentable square footage front. The question is how much, and a lot of that's going to come down to, I mentioned earlier, a lot of these lease termination notifications are being rescinded. Mm-hmm. The real question is going to be how many of those actually get rescinded, how many keep moving forward, and if they move forward all the way to termination, it's also going to be an interesting statistic to watch how many holdovers we see in the inventory, because a lot of these agencies, they don't have anywhere to go, and it takes a while to get move contracts put in place. So these are the kind of things we're really going to be watching. Not only, we're hearing that there might be another wave of lease terminations coming out. If that happens, we'll be updating our tracker, we'll be updating our map. That's not going to be great news for the industry if we see another wave of these come out. But, ultimately the question is, in the aggregate, how many go through all the way to the point of termination? That's the part we just don't know. And we're monitoring. We'll keep our eye on it. That's for sure.
We just both stopped talking.
You're kidding.
Waiting for you. Like when you came in the door, it's like it threw me, and I just watched you walk back.
Oh yeah. And I apologize. I was, as my daughter would say, busting.
That's all right.
Yeah.
Timmy can edit that pause out. No problem.
Yeah. Okay.
Any other questions?
No, I don't think so.
Well, Chad, we do this thing here on the Commercially Speaking podcast, where at the end of most episodes, we give Timmy a pop quiz. Would you be interested in giving Timmy a pop quiz?
Sure. Why not?
Yeah!
All right. So, Chad, here's how this works. We're going to ask Timmy 5 questions. All right. We're going to alternate, you and me. All right. As our guest, you're going to ask question 1, 3, and 5. Now, here's the rules. You can ask Timmy anything that we've covered on this episode or anything else that you'd like. Okay? You can give him a layup. You can try to stump him, whatever the case may be. So, question 1. Chad, what do you got?
I think we're going to go with a potential layup here. What does GSA stand for?
General Services Administration. Or general, right?
Yeah, stop there. Yep. Stop there.
All right.
Nailed it.
Great.
Oh, I did find it fascinating when I went to the DOGE website, it says the Agency Efficiency Leaderboard, and GSA is number 1.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They are.
Makes sense. I also saw, if you scroll down,
Yeah.
in Atlanta, the Center for Disease Control, 121,000 square feet.
Ooh.
Notice a termination.
Wow.
Yeah.
Interesting.
There's more to that story. I can't get into it, but yeah. I will say that's one to keep an eye on.
Yeah. Okay.
I bet.
Yeah.
I bet maybe in a couple months you can come back on and give
Yeah,
us some of the gory details.
Yeah. I know we're just in the middle of the pop quiz, but you've been this has been fun. You're so
Knowledgeable.
Well, yeah, knowledgeable. You communicate so well. This has been quite a pleasure.
I never imagined GSA, the topic of GSA could be this interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Question 2. On the DOGE website, he threw out this number a couple of times. How many leases are on the block right now?
I'm trying not to look at my notes. I want to say somewhere it's like 750 something. I'm going to look now.
You're really close.
Oh, 748.
48. Nice.
There you go.
All right, that's
baby.
close enough.
Okay,
Close enough. We'll give you that one. 2 for 2 so far.
Yeah.
All right, Chad. Question 3.
All right. I mean, let's keep the numbers going. So, within 100, let's say, how many GSA leases are there currently in the inventory?
$7,505.
It's like you wrote that down or something.
Yeah, I did.
Yes.
All right. Woo. Nicely done. Okay. Give me the 4 markets that Chad mentioned that could be the hardest hit.
Okay. Washington, D.C. was
Yes.
the obvious one.
Mm-hmm.
Atlanta,
Mm-hmm.
Denver,
Mm-hmm.
and what is it?
They might have just lost the Super Bowl.
Kansas City.
Yes.
Yeah,
Oh,
Kansas
there
City.
you go.
That's right. Yeah, I was surprised by Kansas City. I was like, oh, I didn't realize there was so much, government leased buildings there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All right. Great. 4 for 4 so far.
Yeah, baby.
All right, Chad. Question
All right.
5.
I'm gonna go with the final one, and we're not even gonna talk about GSA. I'm admiring y'all's studio, right, in the background, and how it compares to my background.
Sure.
This is less of a pop quiz. This is more of I'm looking for advice from Timmy. The shelf of used computers and electronics here.
Yeah.
Keep it, or should it go? Like for future podcast appearances.
That's a good question. Okay, let's see. I want to get this right. Hold on, let me pin your thing so I get a good look at it.
No.
Well, I can tell you right now, I wouldn't be able to tell what it is.
No.
Like, I wouldn't have known that was a stack of old computers or tablets
Same.
and stuff. So if you are gonna have it, figure out a way to feature it. Yeah. That because it looks like a stack of books right now. I would get rid of it unless it's clear what it is, and you can always do that with a little light, or whatever. But what is the reason you have that?
Because I'm lazy, and my wife's been complaining that I never get rid of old electronics, and so I just stuck it on a shelf.
Yeah, and that's a part of who you are, huh?
Yeah, it's a personality piece, kind of like the Bo's basketball in the background, and
Right.
I like the yellow rotary phone I see in the back.
That's right. That's right.
See?
That's it.
Prop from a show, right?
Yeah.
I love it, man.
I think there's no right or wrong answer to that question that you gave me. If it's a part of you, it's a part of your personality. 100% leave it.
Yeah.
Leave it. Right.
Lazy and holds on to stuff. Part of my personality. So
Right. And it almost looks like, too, now that I'm looking at your background, we've been looking at the camera the whole time like it was you. There's a frame there that says, I love New York, that looks like it's wrapped up.
it is.
Wrapped
Yeah,
up. And is that the picture that came with it?
it is.
So you didn't even put that was the picture unwrapped. I love that. I think that's That's
all right,
fun.
this has backfired on me. I regret asking that question. I should have went with something else.
Is that the thing of salt up there or little cotton balls?
It
Maybe
is.
It
that
is?
that salt is from Djibouti. Djibouti in the I'm going to screw it up.
Horn
It's
of Africa.
the Lac du Sal or something like that. The
Oh.
Lake of Salt in Djibouti.
Yeah.
We have a brother who was
like
a
the
Marine
story
Corps
behind that.
pilot, and he was stationed in Djibouti for a while. In fact, that's where he got his call sign. Do you know this story?
I know his call sign,
Which is
Bella.
Bella.
Yeah.
And Chad and all our listeners out there, including our brother Bella,
Yeah, Bella.
this is he got busted watching the Twilight movies while he was deployed in Djibouti because his wife back home was watching them, and so he was trying to do what she was doing, so they
Do something together.
yeah, they were. It was a really sweethearted thing, but oh, buddy, that backfired. Like you do not want to get busted watching Twilight movies by yourself, while you're deployed in Djibouti.
Shout out to anyone and everyone watching this who's been to Camp Limonier in Djibouti. So
Nice.
I think Bella is a great call sign. You know, it backfired, but it's really cool nonetheless.
Yeah,
it's really
for sure.
cool nonetheless. Well, Chad, this has been fascinating conversation, and I think a lot of the things that might traditionally have maybe sounded or felt like they were boring is not at all anymore, especially with the big highlight on this, and everybody is interested in learning about this. So thank you so much for coming on so quickly and everything that you're doing here. We would love to have you back. I know I speak for both of us.
Oh yeah, and you're a great example of how valuable you can become when you absolutely specialize in something. And so based on your background with GSA and now what you're doing now, it's like I can imagine your clients can absolutely trust that they've got the guy in the GSA space. And I don't know how many competitors you have nationally, but you've certainly demonstrated your expertise here with us today. And we really appreciate you taking the time and teaching both of us, in fact, about what's going on. And probably won't be our most evergreen episode.
no,
But a lot of what you communicated is just good baseline foundational knowledge about the GSA leasing process.
Yeah.
And that's going to be valuable
Yes.
for the long term. So thank you so much for coming on, especially in a pinch.
Yeah.
So he
Guys,
told me
it
he was
was-
going to make sure he can get the child logistics figured out. And I like that. I like that term.
Child
So evidently he figured it out. So we appreciate
we got it
Yeah.
figured out. I got an awesome wife, so she jumped in and took over the stuff I had already committed to doing. So
Oh, fantastic.
thanks a lot, guys, for having me on.
Absolutely. If anybody wanted to find you, I know we've mentioned a couple already, but if anybody needed to find you or wanted to find you, where can they do that?
Yeah, so LinkedIn, Chad Becker, easy to find. My profile picture kind of has a goofy lean to it, but that's me. And also, you can find us on our website, RESolutions.com. That's where we're at.
Awesome.
Great.
And and be sure if you get a different page for the map and anything else that we can put on here before this goes live, just email it to us. And man, you've got a great way of communicating, a fantastic timbre in your voice, and you've got a face for the camera. So if you ever, if you're toying with the idea of wanting to do a podcast or any kind of video content or whatever, feel free to reach out to me. I'd be happy to, give you pointers on your background.
Are you looking for a new co-host? Is that what I'm hearing? Because I could step right in there, no problem. So
Yeah, I mean,
Is that what happened just right then? Did I just get fired?
your own show,
What are you talking-
from your own show in front of your face.
Chad, all those nice things I said about you, I just want to forget them all. Okay.
Oh, man.
All right, guys.
Look, he's
Yeah.
testing for his CCIM designation in Miami.
Yeah.
At the end of
nice.
next month.
Oh,
So
yeah.
I'll get to meet him in person.
Yes.
And
Good luck with that.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, good
Thank you
luck.
very much.
That's gonna be great.
Yeah.
That's gonna be great.
You and see you in Miami in April.
That's right.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Sweet.
Chad, thanks so much, man. I'll
Hey.
see you in Miami.
Thanks a lot, guys. Nice meeting y'all.
Yeah,
Yep,
you
likewise.
too.
Take care.
Bye. Yay!
And then all that end stuff you can probably use from the episode with the other Chad. They were both named Chad.
They're both named Chad.
You called him Chad at one point. And
Yeah.
I was like, no, that was the last. Because literally I didn't know this guy until today.
Right. That's right.
So,
yeah.
cool.
All right, cool. Yeah.
Great
no, I can
episode.
do that.